Well, welcome everyone. Today's video, we're going to be talking about some experimenting that I've been doing lately. Due to the COVID situation, I've been able to catch up with some projects that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. Since we can't do my typical photo tours right now, we can't even have workshops. So I've been experimenting some and found out some interesting things, particularly for those of you who have or are thinking of getting the GFX 100. But what I'm about to say will apply to both GFX systems, the GFX 50, maybe the R, I'm not sure, but I own the 50S and the 100. So we'll talk about those primarily, and we found out some very interesting things I think you'll see that will help you in terms of focus stacking and in terms of macro work, etc. So let's get started. Let me tell you what I have done. I decided to try out my macro setup with my Fuji GFX. Now, this is a 100 megapixel camera, so it has some peculiarities, if you will. 100 megapixels, everything shows up in to a greater degree, let's say, than with a 24 or even a 50 megapixel camera. So mistakes that you make might be magnified, so you have to sort of be careful. So what I did is I set up, as you can see here in this camera, let me explain to you from the ground up what I have for those of you who are interested in macro photography. I'll be going into greater detail about this at a later point, but in later videos. But for now, let me just explain the basic setup. So I'm on a Really Right Stuff tripod with a BH55 ball head. Now, the ball head makes a difference because I've got a very heavy setup on top of this. I mean, it's not a 500 millimeter or 600 millimeter lens, but the whole package together is fairly heavy. On top, attached to the BH55, is a plate that allows me, it's a Really Right Stuff plate, that allows me to adjust in very, very fine increments how near or how far I am from the subject. Mounted to that is my GFX 100 with a macro lens, the 120 millimeter macro lens. Now, I have to tell you, this lens is phenomenal. It's great for portraits, it's great for some landscapes, wonderful for panel work. So the 120 millimeter would be the equivalent of a 90 millimeter, excuse me, 90 millimeter in 35 millimeter format. On top of the camera, I have mounted a remote device just so I can trigger it remotely if and as needed. Next, I'll show you the setup. This is very, very rudimentary. This is not what I would usually use for macro, but this is just experimental. So I have set up here for an insect to take a series of macro images with an insect as the subject. The insect I'm using, just for those of you who are interested, is a brown marmorated stink bug. It's actually a beautiful animal, but it has its name because of a substance it excretes that has a distinctive smell to it. Not really a terrible smell, but it does have a smell to it. So for those of you who are specific, it's Heliomorpha hallis is the scientific name, Heliomorpha hallis. So next thing that I need to tell you is using Helicon Focus as the focus stacking focus stacking software to put together the images. I shot anywhere from 15 to 25 images to try to get this stack, and as you'll see now, what you're looking at is the final result of the focus stacking session that I had. Now I have many focus stacks, but here's just one example of it. It looks pretty good, I think, you know, just in general, but pretty good is not good enough. I think you'll notice if you look closely that there are some out of focus areas. Now, of course, when you're dealing with a macro situation with a 100 megapixel camera, there's really no such thing as depth of field. It's either in plane of focus or it's out of focus. So we're taking a sequence of images at very close intervals so that that plane of focus is repeated, and then the software manages to put that together into an image that looks sharp from the closest point to the furthest away point that you want to be in focus. So that's what I was aiming for here, just as I said, experimentally. So in the image you're looking at, you can see that the areas that are closest there, it's not quite exactly in focus. So I was concerned about this. Why wasn't I getting really tack-sharp focus throughout this whole series? And what we found out that there is, I have to say, a real vibration problem that crops up with this camera, this setup, but you may find it true in your camera setups also, your own camera setups, different systems. So the combination of the macro, the 100 megapixel, really made that vibration problem sort of stand out. A couple of other things, and I'll summarize this at the end also, is the electronic shutter did make a difference in helping to make the image sharper. Now, bear in mind here, I'm dealing with a very static subject. The insect is dead. It's not moving. So electronic shutter was able to help in that case. And also, when I institute a shooting delay, 2 seconds to 10 seconds between shots, that did help stabilize the image better. So I had less vibration issues, or actually no vibration issues at that point. So what I like to do is go through with you some actual screenshots showing you, we used a lens, I think my 32 to 64 lens, Fuji lens, as the subject here. So I'm going to show you just 5 images to give you an idea of the difference that happens at different shutter speeds. So this is very shutter speed dependent. What I found. Bob and I, who works with me, and it goes like this. Take a look at this shot now that we're showing you on screen. This was taken at 1/200th of a second without any optical image stabilization. Now you know that a Fuji camera, the 100, the GFX 100, has IBIS or IBIS, however you call it, in-camera stabilization. But this particular lens also has optical image stabilization. And it's a little toggle switch, it's either on or off. In this case, the image you're looking at now was taken at 1/200th of a second with no image stabilization on. So you can notice it's now magnified at 100%, and it is nice and clear. We're happy with the results of this, no problem. Now let's switch to the next one, which is 1/15th of a second, taken without any image stabilization. I think you can see that the lettering is a little bit blurred, again, from the vibration at 1/15th of a second. So this is without the image stabilization. This next one is the same shutter speed, 1/15th of a second, but taken with OIS on. Toggle the switch to on, and it really makes somewhat of a difference. It's not still where I'd like it to be, but it does make a noticeable difference. Okay, let's move to the next one. This is taken at 1/4 of a second with image stabilization on. 1/4 of a second with image stabilization. Now, let me show you the next one, then I'll have to mention something about what you're looking at. The next one is, this one that you're looking at now, is 1/4 of a second without image stabilization. Now, I'll go back to the first, between the first and the second. So if you look at this one now, which is with image stabilization, and then you look at the one without, they kind of look not too much different if you're looking at the vertical part of the D, right? And that's because that's the direction of the axis of vibration. If you look at instead at the E part, the cross horizontal part, you'll notice that there's a significant difference between with image stabilization, which you're looking at now, and without image stabilization, which you're looking at now. So image stabilization really did make a good deal of difference, which is interesting, by the way. I just want to say, because when I was shooting Nikon, and I had the 850, the D850, I had a terrible problem for a while getting focus, sharp focus images when I had the camera mounted on a tripod with my 70 to 200 or my 200 to 400. If I had image stabilization on, I couldn't get a clean shot. I had to make sure it was switched off in order to get a clean shot. So it's interesting to see the difference in the two systems. So this is still a work in progress, folks. I'm going to do a lot more work, a lot more experimentation. I'd like to offer you a template, if you will, on how to get really great macro shots. We're working toward that, and you can stay tuned for another video in which I'll talk more about the exact setup I use, the lighting I use. By the way, this was lit, just so you know, with fixed lighting, not with flash. This is done with static lighting. Since it is experimental anyway, we wanted to limit the variables as much as possible. So that's basically it. The thing is, try using a shooting delay if you're shooting the macro, 2 seconds to 10, anywhere 2 to 10 seconds in between shots. Use electronic shutter. That will help if your image is absolutely static. So that works with macro. Might work with a landscape if you don't have wind, in that situation. But the real issue is one of vibration. So if you're doing macro work, I would recommend that you shoot at least at 1/100th of a second, maybe to 200th of a second, in order to get the shots that you're looking for. If you have any questions, just write in, let us know. We answer usually every question that's on our YouTube channel. But in the meantime, I wish you good luck, stay healthy, and that's about it. Thanks for watching.